I am a student here at Bastyr University, working on my master's in nutrition for wellness. And today we are here to learn how to make some flatbread pizza. It's a vegetarian version, so a little different, but it's still balanced. As you will see, we will be working with a whole grain. So we got whole wheat flour. And then we'll also be using hummus as the sauce base. And it's right over here. It's a roasted tomato and basil, a little bit of sundried tomato in there as well to give it an Italian kick. So we've got our protein and legume, and we've got a whole bunch of vegetables that we'll top as well. With regards to the dough, we'll learn a little bit about the whole wheat flour and the dough making process, as well as the cooking technique of rolling out the dough. So as you can see here, I've got my whole wheat flour, and it was mixed with a teaspoon of salt. The salt just adds a little bit of flavor to it, so the dough doesn't taste too floury. And then on the side here, just to kind of show you what it looks like, I had yeast with a teaspoon of sugar in warm water. The water temperature is very important for the yeast activity, and as you can see, it's quite active. And the purpose of the yeast is to be a leavening agent, so it produces carbon dioxide when it ferments with the sugar, and that gives the crispness of the dough for your flatbread or pizza dough crust, if you will. Has anybody used yeast around here? Nope. All right, well then you got a little yeast information. How about whole wheat flour? What kind of foods have we cooked with whole wheat flour? Anything comes to mind? No? That's okay. So you could do a whole bunch of things with whole wheat flour. You could do breads, you could even do cookies. You might have to mess around a little bit with the proportions of your flour and your other ingredients because whole wheat flour is a good process, so it has a lot of the gluten in it. And with that said, the flour reacts differently with other agents in a recipe, so you have to be a little careful with what you do. Doesn't mean it's impossible, just got to get a little bit creative and maybe a little scientific. So here I have 2 dough balls ready, and they were made after I mixed the whole wheat flour with the salt into the yeast solution. When I mixed it, I beat it as best as I can. So I did it with a spoon, but you could, if you have a KitchenAid mixer or something equivalent that has the appropriate rotor on it, you could do that as well, so you can step away if you need to. You just want to mix it enough so that everything's combined, so that it doesn't get worked. That way the gluten doesn't bind too much to the water in the solution, and it won't be too sticky. So that's a little bit about whole wheat and how to make some dough. The next thing I'm going to go over is how to roll out the dough. Let me clear some space here. So there's a couple important things when it comes to rolling out your dough. It's going to be sticky, it's normal, but it can be frustrating, especially if you're not necessarily in a cool climate or you don't have AC. So some people like to roll out their dough on a marble surface because it tends to stay a little cooler. I don't have a marble surface, but that's okay. You could sprinkle a little flour on it, as well as a little flour on the rolling pin. You don't want to overdo it because that'll change the proportions of your dough. It'll change the texture and the flavor of your dough as well once it's cooked. Another option is if you accidentally spill too much, you can always kind of spread it out a little bit. So here I am, just nice and relaxed, spreading the flour on the surface and then also on my rolling pin. Just in case. Alright, so next I'm going to grab my dough. Oop, sound effects. And if it's a little too big, you could always cut it a little bit. So here I have a knife. And keeping a nice steady hand, cutting all the way through. Now, when you make your dough, you could always stick it in the freezer. It lasts about 3 months, after which point you should probably toss it for food safety reasons. And you could also keep it in the fridge overnight or if you need to step away. So now when we're going to roll out the dough, it's important to work from the center outward. So I have a small piece, probably shouldn't take too long. Let's see how this works. You could always move it. If you have a small enough cutting board, you could move the cutting board instead. And if the edges start to stick to the cutting board, you could always flip them up and then just brush a little flour underneath. Another way of sweeping things under the rug. So you want to continue rolling until the thickness is about 1/4 inch thick. You can have it thicker if you like doughy crusts, or thinner if you like a little more crispiness to it, maybe more New York style. Try to keep a steady pressure throughout so that your edges aren't too thin, and you also don't want the crust to be too thin or the dough to be too thin, so that when you put on the ingredients, it doesn't all collapse when you try to transfer it over to the pan, or when you try to, after it's baked, pull it out. Also, with too much weight, the dough might end up being soggy and might not cook through as well. So I'm going to call this good for right now. If I had a very large piece of dough, I'd be very careful and probably use a spatula to scoop under and transfer it to my pan before I put the toppings on. I'm going to do that anyway just to demonstrate and for the sake of ease. So here I have a baking pan. You could use a pizza pan. I put some parchment paper on it. Some people like to put olive oil on the bottom. Totally fine. I'm just going to scoop it down and transfer it over. All right. So next is the fun part, piling on good stuff. This is the hummus. I soaked the garbanzo, also known as chickpeas, overnight. Blended them with olive oil, some fresh basil, sun-dried tomatoes, as well as some roasted tomatoes. They were roasted in the oven for about 10 minutes with some salt and olive oil. So just like with the dough, I'm going to start at the center and work outward. And with the flavors, it gives it a little bit of a tangy kick. Has anybody tried sun-dried tomato, basil, hummus, or does anybody like hummus in here?
I'm not a fan.
No?
Haven't found the right one yet.
Right on. There's many different
do.
versions, right? I heard that there's some controversy behind it too, as whether you can call it hummus at that point. But in any case. Alright, so I'm happy with that. I'll put the hummus back. Next will be the toppings. Really, you can put the rest of the toppings any way you prefer. So I'm going to put a couple leaves of oregano. So that's my leafy green right here. Arugula. So the arugula gives it a peppery taste. And then some fresh leaves of basil. I've got some red bell pepper. If the slices seem a little big, just muscle it in and break it in half. You could also cut it with a knife. And then some thinly sliced red onion. And some thinly sliced eggplant. So there you have your flatbread pizza. I have an oven preheated to 450 degrees. I'll put it in the oven for 15 to 20 minutes or until the crust is brown on the sides. Now, since it's a whole wheat dough, it's a little darker than your standard pizza dough, and that's okay. So just kind of keep an eye on it. If it looks like it's browning, kind of like like a sand brown, then it should feel ready. And another way is just to kind of take a knife or a spatula underneath and just see if it's nice and firm underneath to see if it's cooked through. Of course, be gentle so everything doesn't collapse. So there we have it, flatbread pizza. We learned a lot about how to make whole wheat dough, a little bit about yeast as a leavening agent, how to roll the dough out properly, and a way to make a delicious vegetarian snack.